Namaste, viewers. Welcome to Jaipur Dialogue USA and Jaipur Dialogue. And today I have the greatest of pleasure in welcoming a very young senior correspondent of the Canadian newspaper, the National Telegraph. As I was going through Daniel's profile in the Twitter, I immediately had a smile on my face because this guy loves Trudeau like nothing else. So, I'm saying this with humor because he is a very determined guy. And, I watched his show and he calls Trudeau's attack on India and accusations and allegations as the second biggest geopolitical disaster of the 21st century. Daniel, welcome to Jaipur Dialogue USA and Jaipur Dialogue for the first ever time. And I hope you will join us more and more later.
Well, you got to see how I do first before you re-extend the invite. But I appreciate it. I'm glad I've been killing it before I open my mouth.
No, we will do that. Before we go through the thing, a little bit of a housekeeping detail. Please like, subscribe, and support our channel. Your support is vital. Your feedback is critical because that's what makes us better going forward, as the saying goes. So, Daniel, I see your profile. There is one thing curious which attracted my attention straight away. And that you say in your Twitter X profile that you are a relapsed stand-up comedian. And I definitely want to understand the term, who is a relapsed stand-up comedian? But I do notice that your video, the one I watched, was full of very interesting twist on comedy. Daniel.
Yeah, so I was a stand-up comedian before I was anything else. I mean, in university, third year, when I was 20 in 2012, I just started doing comedy. I wanted to do it. I was disaffected by the education system. I ended up getting my degree in psychology from Queen's University. So if anyone's going to try and say he's not a real journalist, he doesn't have journalistic credentials, sure, whatever. Like I don't care. Like I'm a stand-up comedian who eventually started saying the news. So I did it. Toronto, grinded, I was doing 10 shows a night, moving up my career. And then like 2015, 2016, when things started to break down, I met another stand-up comedian who was a political prisoner, former refugee from Iran. We were like, is the society going to collapse along partisan lines due to utter foolishness? We're like, yeah. So we decided to say something about being more classically liberal before it was kind of too late was a thing. We started getting more political, making more political content, and feeling the necessity. Like Canada has very bad free speech. A comedian was taken to the Supreme Court for a joke. It's the Mike Ward case, if you're going to look it up. So it was sort of time I didn't want to get on stage and lecture everyone my political beliefs, but I had things to say, and they're important things to say. So we started doing that together. That went well. He got out of the activism game because he's been to prison. He was tortured. He'd had enough life, and I was still good going. I ended up getting a show on Tag TV. That studio closed down during the pandemic, but right before then, we co-founded the National Telegraph. There was a bunch of us who got together and created the National Telegraph online news. Did that, and sort of since the pandemic and there was the lockdowns, some people started to do some illegal stand-up comedy. So I started to go back into it, because listen, the people who are doing illegal comedy shows will probably fine with what I was going to say. So there was on and off, and folks in National Telegraph, and then in Toronto. So this is the big thing that brought me back in. And this is a great story if you're going to look this up. So one of my best friends from university, Ben Bankus, another comedian, we started together, the two Queen students doing comedy. He's pretty successful in Canada now. He's very based and funny, but he's anti-establishment, right? So it's hard for him to book stuff. And our mayor of Toronto resigned in a lame sex scandal. So there was going to be a runoff. And I called up Ben Bankus. And I'm like, Ben, you're running for mayor. Like, it's too funny. Like, he does some political comedy. I have a thing. Like, dream team, let's go. Let's troll the entire city, the entire country. We started making videos running for mayor as the most woke parody. He brought a whole rainbow pride suit. We went full out Toronto. We're like, we're going to ban white people. We're going to ban all cars. Toronto's just going to be one giant bike lane. You name the insane woke progressive thing. That was our platform. Vaccine clinics, maid clinics, gender clinics, everywhere. It was insanity. He then identified as Olivia Chow, who won the thing. And the videos were just going viral, and it was hilarious. and we were doing that, and then touring with like Ben and he just kind of, we went to Kingston or where Queens was, and he kind of at the Maddie just kind of pushed me back on stage to okay, do it, and then I did it, and it went well, and then he kept pushing, and then all right, so now I do comedy again because it's fun and I love it, and if the government's going to try and ban the news online, you kind of need a backup plan. Going viral in India was not the first thing I thought of. It was on the list of things to potentially try, but it was like, well, if they're going to ban the online news with this Bill C-18, might as well, see if I can go back to, making some money as a stand-up comedian. So yeah, that's the thing. It's like journalist by day, stand-up comedian at night. If it's like, that's harder for people to take me seriously, I don't care. Like, we're not a serious country right now anyway. So, why do I have to be that serious?
The touch of humor. We are not a serious country anyway. That was wonderful. But I want to say something because I believe in comedy. I believe in laughter. I believe that we must find moments to laugh. And comedy does provide us with that outlet, with that, burst of pressure cooker. You laugh about things and things become lighter. And I do admire Bill Maher and Jon Stewart, who I think are intelligent, artists, comedy artists and commentators. And, whether you agree with the philosophy or not, or their strategies or not, but they do bring home points. Jon Stewart and Bill Maher, both. And Bill Maher recently talked about, since you talked about woke part, that the wokies are killing the comedy business and the entire comedy, because the political correctness brings in us an element of, dishonesty.
Yeah.
Because political correctness brings an element of dishonesty, where you tell the truth and everybody has the right to become a victim and upset. That's entire thing is a really tragic one.
It's even worse than that in Canada. A lot of the venues that that we try and book, like Ben, like I'll talk about my friend Ben Bankus here. Like Ben's doing well. He does not have a problem selling out. This is not like most comedians like, oh, I need to sell tickets. How do I sell tickets? He sells tickets. His problem is getting venues in Canada to allow him to give them money. And he has a video he put on Instagram and Twitter where he calls a venue and they outright say they can't book him. And they say, we're not going to let anyone come here who isn't left wing because we rely on government subsidies for all these diversity stuff. So yes, the woke stuff kills comedy, but there's also like a bureaucratic wokeness, which strangles the ability of anyone creative or out of the box to make a living in our country. So yeah, it's bad. And listen, I've always tried to incorporate some comedy, like naturally. Like, I mean, I remember myself in grade school, I was just trying to make people laugh a lot of the time. Like, I wasn't overly disruptive, but if I had a funny thing to say, I would. And I would bring this into the news thing. And I always thought, like, when you deal with complicated issues that are very serious to people, and people like to get enraged on the political spectrum, left, right, like, it's important. Things are important and people get fired up. But I always found if you could take a serious issue and make people laugh just a few times when talking about it, it's what you said, like the steam releases, the pressure releases. They get less crazy. They feel less gaslit. They know someone understands them. They got a bit of a release for that tension. And I think that calms everyone down, which is something despite what my detractors would say and me going around the TV yelling at everyone, I do genuinely try and bring something interesting, informative, but also if you listen, like, and you're really worked up beforehand, I think people who listen to me or are worked up beforehand can kind of get a bit of catharsis by seeing me ramble about it, get a few laughs, and then can bring them down a few levels, which is probably good for them and probably their wives and other family members too. So that's how I save the.
Thank you very much, because this was important for the viewers. If you are wondering why aren't we talking about India-Canada relationship, but we are talking about comedy, because expression of comedy is the litmus test of freedom of speech, acceptance, and tolerance. And that's the important part that I wanted to, when I read that he's a relapsed stand-up comedy, it attracted me because I do believe in humor. And I do believe that expressing yourself in comedic terms is the biggest test of freedom of speech. Let us get back to another very important topic, your favorite, the geopolitical disaster that Trudeau did. I will preface it with one statement. Several years ago, I was attending a major investment seminar done by one of the largest investment companies in America. And they made a statement there. Politicians are not stupid. They do everything in a calculated way. They want to derive a mileage. They want to test the crowd. They want to test the polling. What was the wisdom of Trudeau
You just you
taking
just
on
you just
India?
you just
Taking
said the
on
magic
India.
word.
Thank you. Going toe to toe with India, which is multiple times giant of Canada, a very strategic element in the entire Indo-Pacific region and the Indo-Pacific, strategic part, geopolitical element for entire Western world.
Yeah, I will clarify. The magic word was not Justin Trudeau. It was actually polling. In Canada, if you watched our TNT Live National Telegraph thing with Wyatt Claypool and I, our old arch enemy is actually the polling companies in Canada. And that's a solid 10-minute rant. I'll leave for another day because that's maybe more for Canadians. But my arch nemesis is actually the polling companies. And it's insane. These idiots don't do anything without conducting a poll first. The polls are, okay. Justin Trudeau, what's he doing in India? I have no idea. No one has any idea. Now, there's a lot of different interpretations you can give. You can give like the most charitable interpretation to Justin Trudeau imaginable. And that would go something along the lines of, this was a Five Eyes report. U.S. intelligence picked up concrete proof that the Indian government was directly involved in Hardip Singh Nijjar's killing. And, we have them dead to rights. And this is just Justin Trudeau, standing up for Canada, trying to make a point, and he's giving the Indian government enough chance to back down and say the sorry. If that's the case, this hasn't been the most skillfully conducted operation ever. Two, if I get to the Americans, but like again, Justin Trudeau just looks like he's lying. The way he's going about it, potential link with credible allegations with the potential link, only releasing the open source intelligence to Dave Enby, the premier, doesn't have this. And then, we have the report for the Washington Post that the assassins were likely Sikhs or dressed to look like Sikhs and took him out. So this brings up a thing of like Occam's razor. When I first heard this guy died 3 months ago, I went, oh, another Khalistani gang leader killed. Like another. Like it's not like, oh my God, someone involved in the Khalistani movement was gunned down outside a temple. What has happened? It's like, yeah, okay. There was one last week. Like, this is just a problem we've been ignoring, except me and a few others. So you have that. Like, so maybe it's absolute BS. And then let's give a more generally hypothetical scenario, like the sort of the meet in the middle scenario, where it's not just totally made up by the Canadians and it's not like dead to rights, the Indians did it. What if they intercepted a diplomatic cable or something where the guy we kicked out said, yeah, we got him. But what they actually did is the Indian government had, put rumors into different Khalistani gangs that Najjar has defected and was leaking intelligence to the Indians. And that set off a series of events that led to his assassination by a rival gang. Well, then who killed him here? Like, is it the Indian government? Is it their fault for manipulating our massive Khalistani gang problem in their favor? Like, is that an illegal activity, clandestine foreign interference? Like, what's going on there? And then we haven't caught dead to rights. So either way you slice it, the world's not going to come to our aid over Hardip Singh Nijjar when they see the videos of him supporting suicide bombings, kill the Hindus, violent ethnic separatism, his lawyer, Penu's running around telling the Hindus to get out of Canada. So when Americans, and Indians, I assume the majority of your audience, like even if they were to see proof that it was, okay, the Indian government was behind it, like Indian citizens are not going to be like, oh no, our government took out the guy who was openly trying to kill us with suicide bombings, right? So this isn't something that the world's going to be like, oh no, we have lost the greatest man of all time, whatever. The Canadian media is pretending he's like a plumber who, cured cancer, but no one trusts the Canadian media because it's garbage and it's completely government subsidized. So the disaster here is, how did our foreign policy cadre think that they could get away with kicking out a diplomat while the investigation isn't over, without having the ability to come forward with the smoking gun? And maybe there's also the possibility that it's good for no one if we come forward with the smoking gun, right? Let's say, because the Americans probably don't want to reveal how they got this intelligence, hypothetically, right? Because if they had hacked WhatsApp, it's not good if they're looking and the Indian knows, okay, they're hacking our WhatsApp, even though everyone's trying to hack everyone. But what if the Americans have found a way to infiltrate Signal, which we all think is secure? do you really want to blow this, shot on India, our friggin' ally? Or do you want to save this one for the IRGC agents from Iran who are flying in to conduct clandestine anti-American activities, right? So this benefits no one here, right? So this is a massive, catastrophic geopolitical failure on maybe all sides, maybe Canada, maybe America. We don't know. All we know is this is a complete breakdown and it shouldn't be happening. At a time where Chinese interference is on the rise, the Islamic Republic of Iran is getting more belligerent because Joe Biden gave him $6 billion. We need to focus on confronting our enemies and not insane, stupid fights with our allies who are mad at us for harboring anti-India sentiment and pretty much, violent separatist, ethno-nationalist, balkanizational activists. Like, we can't continue to do this. I totally understand why India's mad at us. Justin Trudeau invited Jasper Atwal, a man convicted in Canadian courts, of trying to assassinate Indian officials. So, again, no one gets through the Prime Minister's office unvetted. This doesn't happen. He was invited. And we have another scandal right now about the PMO not vetting a literal Nazi before he speaks in Parliament in front of the Ukrainian Prime Minister on the eve of Yom Kippur. Like, this is the level of monumental incompetence, hypocrisy, and outright, dodgy behavior from Trudeau and the Liberals means that even if they had the smoking gun, there's so many people that just wouldn't believe them. Like, there's no reason to believe Justin Trudeau other than I have a feeling in my heart that he's got it here. Like, there is literally no, like, he could be. There's a hypothetical scenario where the Americans have something and they don't want to make it public, and there is something there. But Trudeau's acting like he's got nothing. He's talking like he's got nothing. And he's conducted himself in a way that even if he has something, I wouldn't blame half the world for not believing him. So he's concocted this disaster because geopolitics might not always be about what is true, what isn't true. A lot of it is what looks to be true or what could be true or how things are perceived. And this isn't that, like, if there were any adults in the room in Canada, someone should have explained this to him. But I think he's inculcated such a cult of personality and kicked out so many of the older guys, and people have to resign through scandals, that it seems like he's just sort of surrounded by yes men and ideologues and Jagmeet Singh, and we've known about the Khalistani infiltration into the NDP and the Liberals for a long time. So this could be, I wouldn't put it past this being an ideologically driven thing from, the progressive left and their extremist allies.
That's a wonderful narration of the fact. And as I always say, my theory is smart people make dumb mistakes, smarter people make dumber mistakes, and the smartest people make dumbest mistakes. So this theory has held on to me very well over a period of time. But the issue here is also very important. That is, you talked about that, the perception. Even if he has something, who is going to believe him? The trust factor in politicians is today so low that, a friend of mine who has also a very acerbic and very interesting twist of humor, he tweeted it actually. He said, if the allegations prove true that India did it, I will forgive Prime Minister Modi all his sins and all his opposition to him. I'll say India did it finally. So we are in the big league of, what have you, MI5, MI6, CIA, KGB, Mossad, whatever is there, that goes on. So that said, it is important that trust and credibility factor. The West is losing that battle and that perception battle all over the world, because how much ever we play with the English words, it's not gelling well anymore. How do you talk about that credibility factor of the West? There was once upon a time, America did this, it must be right. Now America must have done it, there has to be something wrong about it, starting from WMD onwards.
Yeah, so I believe in the Western powers. I believe in Western civilization. I believe in, that, but also I also believe in bringing the free nations of the world under the banner, not of the West, but of free nations. So India, Japan, South Korea, they're not Western nations, they're not Western cultures, but there are free allies, and there needs to be, treated as such. Here's the danger to India that I see. I see the destruction of the West coming from within, like the calls coming from inside the house. This is the cultural relativism, the Marxism, the socialist, Islamist, Khalistani, all these bad ideas infiltrating our institutions. And it's built up this deeply anti-Western attitude. And when people with anti-Western attitudes like Justin Trudeau get in control of countries that they dislike philosophically, bad things happen. And you can hear this as India, as the West going down, we're going up, but you have the same problems. I have seen some Indian universities. If you watch the Kashmir Files, I think it does a great job illustrating some of the problems within your institutions, which are very similar to ours. So there is this sort of masochistic element to the socialist, progressive, whatever you want to call it, left. And if it's allowed to sort of, and it's metastasized, right? It started in the Western universities and it's going out. So all the things that are sort of breaking down the West, this incredible polarization where it's, you love the country, you hate the country. I'm very cautious for, especially India, to kind of cheer on this. I would caution India to kind of look at what's happening, understand that if your institutions fail, like if students can just get funding and government funding and go into debt to take sociology or gender studies or any of these inane degrees, they're going to come in through the bureaucracies, they're going to come in through this, and they're going to infiltrate, and they're going to start to bring your country down. They're going to start to say, oh, Pakistan's the victim, Kashmir is a place of discrimination. Maybe the Punjab region should be have it a thing, because who are we to tell ethnic minorities what to do? Like, this ideology is international, right? It's the international left. It's very easy to adopt. It sounds complicated. You can learn it in 5 minutes. And I'm very, very concerned, one, for my own country and seeing it, but I'm also very concerned for India, because I believe that the West and India both need each other, and both need each other to be strong and healthy and good allies. Because yes, the hedge against China, but it's like wealth, prosperity, innovation, good trade, like security, all these things help India grow. And India's eradicating at a fast rate, there's extreme poverty. It's not gone. It's a country of 1.5 billion. It's growing. I want India to keep that up. I want India's middle class to be way more powerful than China's middle class, because I want Canadian farmers to sell them food and then buy their stuff and make us richer and you richer and safer. Like, this is the end game we need to get to. And the last couple of weeks have pushed us further away from it. And Justin Trudeau threatens to irrevocably destroy the possibility. And that's what I find very concerning.
I totally agree with you that, somewhere along the line, the democracies of the world, the free nations of the world will practice, and definitely democracy and free nations world have their own set of complications everywhere. Yeah. The question here is that why are allies hitting at each other? Things of which West suffers from. I coined the word from woke. I also coined the word wokistanis. So, so the point is, the wokes and wokistanis around the, you refer to them, the Indians coming here to study sociology and falling into the trap, of the leftist education. Let's switch to one very important topic here. The West talks about the rule-based order. Jaishankar, External Affairs Minister Jaishankar, pointed out at the United Nations, the rule-based order must apply equally to everybody. You can't have a double standard.
And I hard disagree with this. I hard disagree. And this is an issue. Like, listen, I just believe in reality. Like, that's a nice thing to think, and that would be productive. But the way the world works, geopolitics 101, you can waste $50,000 at a useless education right now, or I could tell you that might makes right. You can get away with what you can get away with. India can get away with more than Sri Lanka. Why? You know why. America can get away with more than Canada. Why? We all know why. Right? There's a reason you can't bully China, you can't bully Russia, but you can bully Kazakhstan, you can bully Libya, you can bully Botswana. Right? Because you can do what you can get away with. And this is the natural geopolitical order. Right? And it's how do we jockey within this system of, might makes right and alliances that go forward. And the other thing with geopolitics, I will say, is there are two ways to enrich your nation: raiding and trading. Right? And the latter is far more beneficial. So the skill of geopolitics is to actually get into enough links and trade with and the key here is we're starting to learn with allied countries. Like it doesn't work with China, right? I think the thing is you want to get into good trading relations and had good relations, so you're both invested in each other, and in that type of environment, if you had a Canadian leader who cared about Canada, there's much more domestic incentive for us to take care of this Khalistani problem because we need to keep, our alliances going, right? Any solution between India, Canada, and the West starts with Canada dealing with the Khalistani problem. We can't have people openly advocating for violent ethnic separatism in a foreign country, in our country, especially when the Khalistanis are the worst terrorists in Canadian history. They blew up Air India. They've conducted multiple assassination attempts on our soil. So it's not like they haven't killed Canadians, right? Like for all the wokistani, like, oh, we care more about visible minorities than you center-right bigot. I think Terry Molaski, like, are the only ones who think that Indian Canadians are actually Canadians. That just because they're brown and have an accent doesn't mean they deserve any less protection than the rest of us. And that's sort of what drives me crazy is, I genuinely care about the lives of Canadian citizens. I don't just pick and choose when it's politically convenient to do so. So like it's the gaslighting here. Why are we going to DEFCON 1 over Harjit Singh Najjar, who looks like he died in a gang violence accident or attack? And we didn't do anything when Karima Baloch was strangled from behind, thrown in a river, likely by you-know-who, and we ruled it a suicide. She came up behind herself, strangled herself to death. Then after she died, she picked up her body and threw it in the river. We literally ruled that a suicide in Toronto. An international human rights activist was clandestinely murdered by a hostile foreign power. We ruled it a suicide, and we didn't say anything in the government. It was me. The Toronto Sun wrote an article about it. Maybe someone else. I think Joe Warmington, I can give him a shout out. But other than that, radio silence, right? So it's like, and now we're going to DEFCON 1 over a Khalistani gang member where there's conflicting reports, and likely, even if there is a smoking gun, we're never going to get it in the public. So what the heck are we doing? Why are we here? There had to be a better way to solve this through diplomatic back channels. If India was responsible, do the worst thing you can, give them a slap on the wrist at the UN. Right? And India sit there and the UN, someone wrote a letter. Who cares? Then let's sign a trade deal. Like that should have been the response if India actually was involved in this. Shouldn't be any diplomats kicked out. There should be a nebulously worded letter to the UN that gives you a warning. Like it means nothing. Israel gets 50 of them a day, right? So that should have been the solution, and then we all move on. But the fact that we're wasting diplomatic resources fighting each other when we have real enemies in the world is beyond insane. It has to stop. And it's going to continue as long as Justin and Jagmeet are in charge of this country because Jagmeet's an ideological Khalistani and Trudeau's let them come into his party. So
this is indeed mind-boggling because, Trudeau is running a 63% disapproval ratings. Economy is in a mess. Trade and commerce, as you rightly said, is the way to build things in the communities and between the countries. Ignoring all that, when you look at one incident about which the videos at the Gurudwara have pointed out, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police and the local police, they themselves arrived very late. They haven't arrived at a conclusion yet. Yet the Prime Minister has the goal to tell in Parliament that we have credible evidence.
With the potential.
Where in heavens does it come from?
You'd have to assume it's the Five Eyes report that he's talking about.
But even for the Five Eyes report, sorry to interrupt you here, that even Jake Sullivan and the Americans and the rest of the Four Eyes, they haven't come out categorically condemning India. They came with what would be known as a standard diplomatic response to that. President Biden at the United Nations actually praised India, showing the new pathway of global economic development. And Jake Sullivan said, hey, we are not going to mess with the Indian power-India relationship at all. It's not a wedge between us. It kind of says exactly what you and I are probably hinting at.
Yeah.
What was Trudeau's compulsion?
Again, I don't know. And I could also say this is also an example of might makes right? So maybe there is something. Again, if there was something and this was Sri Lanka, we could sanction them, force them to apologize, do whatever. But if it's India, you can't, right? So it's also showing that India's made the Mohammed bin Salman point of what you're going to do, hypothetically, if there is something. Right now, in the instance that Trudeau has lied and misrepresented an intelligence report, which he hasn't done in a couple months, he lied in the CB. There was to justify the Emergencies Act. The CBC in an article that they later retracted. That's the government news media, like our PBS, funded to $1.5 billion a year. They created a BS article that the RCMP then used to justify giving Trudeau a report that, the truckers who were like, we're here for peace, just lift the mandates, Hong Kong. It's like, oh, they're all terrorists because of this CBC article. The article was later retracted because it was absolute garbage. And then the Emergencies Act was revoked and people's skulls were bashed. Bank accounts were frozen without criminal charges. And it turns out it was all based on a concocted lie that the government fed to itself. Oopsie doodles. So again, as a Canadian citizen who's watched all this, and when Justin Trudeau says, oh, I got an intelligence report in my back pocket, well, I've seen a Canadian intelligence report on terrorism before, which were truckers honking, and it had to be retracted. It was complete nonsense. So knowing Trudeau, knowing the issue of Khalistani gang violence, what's my Occam's razor? Khalistani gang violence that was probably, I think, celebrated inside the walls of the Indian embassy because they didn't like him. And then that was sent to Trudeau, and he probably mixed that up with an open source intelligence report, which is just random Khalistani lunatics sending you articles. I get open source intelligence reports on the Indian government all the time. It's the Khalistani lunatics in my replies and DMs, right? It's I mean, you can read their stuff. It's absolutely insane. You meet these guys. The guy who blew up the Air India bombing, Palinder, is both a Shaheed, martyr, hero of the Sikh nation, who did the most heroic thing ever. And then the same people 1 tweet later will say, but the Air India bombing was faked by the Indian government to slander the Sikhs. But I thought he was a hero for going boom. But so I called the Khalistani movement Schrodinger's terrorism, where it is both like heroic that they do it and made up that they don't at the same time. So I mean, what do I think happened? I think they just got a bunch of open source stuff, which is that I think we're able to prove, probably just Occam's razor, was the Indian government monitoring this guy? I would be if I was the NIA. Hello, that's kind of their job. So like you can prove motive and you can prove potentially opportunity, right? What is the motive? This guy's advocating for violent balkanization of your country. Motive. Opportunity. Okay, they're the Indian government. They could whack anyone anywhere because it's just one guy. They could. But then we don't have a weapon. We don't have the suspects. We don't have all the other stuff. And back to the motive thing, like this is very interesting because one, like risk reward. Like what's India, like was the Punjab region about to go on absolute chaotic fire if Najjar was allowed to make one more stupid speech about whatever he was talking about? Probably not. And what was the risk? Well, we see the risk here. So, I mean, the risk reward from a logical point of view doesn't seem to be in favor. But like, what if, again, what if they just kind of took advantage of some sort of Khalistani gang violence situation and we overheard them and then it just becomes this absolute entangled mess that we have to do. And so the ultimate problem is here, though, we have a problem with Khalistani gang violence in Canada. Like that's the problem. And we can call it terrorism all you want. I would, if we want to do something about it, I would maybe avoid the terrorism stuff because when the Indian government says these guys are terrorists, it allows them to gain sort of political asylum in a weird way. But if they started talking about, the drugs, the gun running, the immigration fraud, the gang behavior, that doesn't qualify for any special protection. And it's also a lot easier to enforce that stuff. Terrorism is a very, very, very high bar in Canadian courts to meet. So a lot of people won't even try and touch it because of everything that comes with it. And like, it might sound like, oh, he's going soft on these terrorists. Here's a list of all these things. I'm more saying, think of the Al Capone analogy, which a lot of Americans get. Was Al Capone, committing mass murders and whacking people? And yes, did they get him for murder? No, they got him on taxes. So I'm just saying that the better way to clean up the Khalistanis in Canada, probably not through the counterterrorism, but probably through the organized crime element of it, because that's easier for people to deal with. It doesn't create a whole kerfuffle. And then we don't need to play Canada can just pretend we're taking care of gang violence and sort of leave the sort of violent ethnic separatism part of it sort of out, just for those in the know, because then it gets too scary for a lot of Canadians when we start talking about serious issues. We want to put our head directly in the sand and pretend America's crazy and we're so nice and everyone gets along here. And we don't want to even fathom the thought that our kindness and our empathy and our, ignorant attitude towards a lot of these issues has fostered a toxic environment for the very people we claim to be protecting. A lot of Canadians don't want to deal with that reality.
I would gravitate and kind of agree with you about how to deal with the situation. What is true is that India has been a victim of terrorism, of Islamic terrorism and Khalistani terrorism in India, which the West did not believe. And the West began to take it seriously because of a very tragic 9/11 and many London bombings and whatever. That's the time when the word terrorism came upon to be accepted by the West, although the United Nations has not yet defined it. So you are right. It's very difficult to box somebody in the word called terrorism because my terrorist is somebody else's freedom fighter. These are the arguments advanced. But I think you are absolutely on the money when you recommend that, hey, drugs, illegal arms, possession of, doing illegal activities,
murder, violence, intimidation,
murder,
racketeering,
violence, those are indefensible elements that nobody can defend. So that would be a good strategy. This also brings about a very powerful thought process about the West. And my question will be a statement that criminals and thugs take advantage of the compassion of the society and the rule of law. And I was told about this 9/11. It's not that I heard about it. Somebody told me. This is just the beginning. Those who know me, they know this statement, and I'm sharing it with you for the first time. I was told that this is the beginning. We will take advantage of every single rule and democratic freedom that you give us. Not guilty until proven. So we'll kill your guys. Your Jews, your whites, your Hindus, your Indians, black, white, anybody will contest our case for free. Go figure. And we are seeing that happen. How does the West deal with that? How do the democracies deal with that when your enemy begins to play the game better than you designed it?
Yeah, this is, again, why we need to rebuild the institutions. I mean, you've highlighted a big problem is those with bad motivations, like bad actors, will push and push and push until pushback, right? A lot of people won't stop until they get, punched back. And, and they've done a really good job of it. And they've been incredibly nefarious in the way they do it. And one of the things that extremists always do, Khalistani Islamists, is they will cloak themselves in the entire community. So what Al-Qaeda, what, Jamaati Islami, what the Muslim Brotherhood, Hizb ut-Tahrir, what they want to do is cloak themselves in all of Islam. So when they don't want to be called terrorists, when they do it, part of what they want is to have people go, it's the Muslims that do it, and general things. So there's a fear in the Muslim community, and then it brings them more insular. And that makes them easier to radicalize, and they help build their base. And to an extent, like, this is where the compassion comes from. Like, this is where the general lefties don't want to talk about it because they're so afraid of this spiral. I think a lot of people do legitimately believe that if we just let them blow up a tower here or blow up a tower there, and we don't say anything Islamophobic, it will go away. Whereas the actual solution here is to speak clearly and courageously and make sure that we don't have people on our side saying, all Muslims are this, all Muslims are that, go and get them. And listen, there's always going to be people who say that on all ends of the political spectrum. India is a country of 1.5 billion people. Some of those people are insane. Just think of that uncle or cousin I just made you think of. That's absolutely nuts. We all have them, right? But the strategy is those of us leading the conversations, like, there needs to be enough freedom in the West, in our democracies, for those of us that are capable to lead these conversations in a productive way can have them across the aisle. Because, again, the Khalistanis are trying to portray themselves as Sikh religious leaders when the majority of Sikhs openly oppose the Khalistani movement. The people opposed to the Khalistani movement in Canada, it's me, Terry Molaski, my colleague Wyatt Claypool, and then a bunch of guys wearing turbans, right? Like that's the anti-Khalistani, hit team. It's the 3 white dudes and a bunch of Sikhs who are absolutely tired of this and don't want to paint with the brush. But the Khalistanis want to make this a Sikh issue. So some racist white guy gets up in Burnaby, British Columbia, and starts yelling about Sikhs. So they go to the Gurdwaras, say, "What's going on?" And I feel very racist towards me. And then one of Jagmeet's friends says, "Hey, have you heard about Khalistan? Maybe you can wave a flag, yell at a Hindu guy, have a fun." So this is a spiral that we want to avoid. But the only way to avoid that, I think, is to speak truth and clearly and live in a society that allows us to do that, which is not Canada. That's America. So if the West is going to be saved, it's going to have to be from the south of where I am right now. Actually, some of America's north of where I am right now. But if you get my point, I believe better speech counters bad speech, and because we've been so cowed as a society with the fear of backlash stuff, that we have media that's tripping over themselves to silence people who want to legitimately talk about this and paint them as insane. And then who's the only people who end up talking about these issues? Lunatics, because they're the only ones who aren't afraid of the blowback or whatever. So you just get people on the street yelling nonsense things, and then it undermines the arguments we want to make against the radicals. So it's been a catastrophic intellectual failure. There's a serious lack of moral and intellectual courage in the West, and until that supply and demand problem is fixed, I think we're going to continue to scuffle on these issues.
That was a very strong point, and this is what is a challenge for democracies, because you are right. I totally agree with you, because even Eric Swalwell, a congressman from California, issued a tweet saying that I shouldn't say tweet, I should say X. He said and made an X by saying that we need Sikh lives have to be protected, and we have to protect and any murder or anything. But what I wanted to say, I did reply to him, it is not Sikhs. Sikhs are not a victim here.
No.
Or they are not the ones who are causing this. It is a very fringe element within the Sikh community, extremists of their own kind, who are causing the problem. They want to silence even anybody who makes a reasonable statement. And to that end, I will make the last inquiry with you, that you and you are from Jewish faith, if I'm correct. I'm a Hindu faith, I'm an Indian. You may not be an Israeli. But the point is that we are the most peace-loving community in the world. We have not gone around putting our flag, our faith. We like to live within ourselves. Yet, you and I will be blamed as phobic having this conversation. That's a problem that I have. West is not kind to people like us.
No, they're not. And yeah, I've had much success working with Hindu communities, Jewish communities, because right, the non-proselytization thing, we can meet, what lets Jews and Hindus get along really well is we can both meet in the same room, and neither of us will try and convert the other. So it's a good way for a conversation to start. Now, listen, I'm every phobia-ism, and is it if you're not in Trudeau camp, in Canada, he already called you a Nazi. So for me, it's you only get canceled if you let yourself get canceled. So yeah, if someone who doesn't agree with my politics thinks I'm an ism or a phobia, whatever, listen, I know what I said. I know I've never advocated for the destruction of Group X or Y. I might have said something terrible about the Minnesota Vikings or Chicago Bears or Detroit Lions while watching the Packer game, but that doesn't count. I will scream crazy things tomorrow night or whenever this Thursday night football. I will be screaming crazy things, horribly crazy things. But other than that, I know what I've said. And if you want to call me lionsophobic, fine. But all this other stuff, I just find you got to just let it roll off your back. And listen, if you're not on the political left, there's places that will just never book me or give me opportunities to begin with. So yeah, I'll get banned from the CBC, but I was never going to get allowed on the CBC to begin with. So, I just kind of believe in trying to do the right thing, speaking my mind, seeing where it takes me. And sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. And, sometimes I just click a Zoom portal and it's Indian TV. Who knew? That's an interesting place I've gone. That's just been my philosophy is I try not to get too bogged down in people trying to bring you down with nonsense. Like the AntiHate Network, like this big Canadian, like liberal, awful place that tries to get everyone for hate speech. When we started having success and going a bit viral on India, like they tried to come after us, and the whole thing can is be like, oh, the AntiHate Network's coming after me, they're losing. It's like, no, block. Like, I don't need this. Like, you're a bunch of losers. You're trying to get famous off of my success. You're all losers. I'm not talking to you, right? And if you just do that, then they've gone away. Like, I haven't heard them in a while because they want to pick on someone who's going to be like, I'm the victim. Look at me. I'm not this. They're not fighting. But most of these people who spend their lives watching this podcast just hate watching it. I'm taking notes on things to write an article to call them all Islamophobic. And Daniel Bordman said he hates Detroit Lions. He must kill losers. They're losers. They're just losers. Don't engage. They're parasitic losers, and they deserve to be treated as such. And when you treat them like that, they go away.
Great. Do you think Trudeau gets any kind of an advantage with this tirade of his, this blunder of his? Any bump he gets in his poll?
Oh, he's been hurt
or whatever.
He might have a killer.
And follow back, and then we will close today's conversation. Is how are the Canadian mainstream responding to this? Are they like the Lotus Eaters, or they are concerned about their bad image Canada is getting?
Yeah, they're very concerned. Canadians love the image of being the peace-loving, reasonable younger brother to the Americans. That has been threatened. They're not happy with that. Trudeau's going to kill the polls. If you can put the Liberals and the NDP combined, they're not passing the Conservatives. So that's an insane number in Canada. Like we've never seen this level of unpopularity among the Liberal Party. He's getting slaughtered. Like, what does Trudeau get out of this? The only thing I can say is he's going to have a dynamite speaking tour in Pakistan when this is all
done. Thank you. I really enjoyed the conversation because I did a show with the famous Canadian Terry Milewski a few weeks ago, and I would urge you to watch that. But Terry knows the Khalistan thing inside out.
The Canadian hero.
But there is another part. I mean, I don't want to stop this conversation, but I wanted to ask you that many Canadian authors have written books, including Stuart Bell, who rang the bell that Canada is exporting, nurturing terrorism. Mm-hmm. That's a massive statement. I won't say accusation, massive statement. How does Canada get out of that? This is the last thought that I want to hear from you.
It's different leadership. I mean, in my view, the progressive left has just kowtowed and is now the absolute punching bag and doormat for Islamists, all types of terrorist infiltration. This needs to be brought to the public's attention. In a way, it's kind of good that this India thing has happened because it's kind of forced some Canadians to learn about this issue. My following's grown a lot, and people are kind of looking at me going like, what's going on? So I'm never going to make it on the CBC, CTV, like global news. I'm not going to get that mainstream Canadian platform to give a different perspective on this issue. Like that, that's not going to happen. But Canadians are so fed up. They're used to using alternative media, and these concerns are growing. They are now manifesting, and there will be a new party when the election is done, and it will be 99.9% sure it's Poilievre coming in with his Conservatives. And I really hope they are determined to fix it. There will be forces trying to infiltrate the party to stop them. The Khalistanis, the Muslim Brotherhood, Jamaat-e-Islami, radical socialists, like the cabal of bad ideas will come and try and do what they can. And you got to hope that the Conservatives have a stronger bulwark against this nonsense than the Liberals. I hope Stephen Harper can be called because he was pretty good at keeping, knowing which groups are which and making clever choices over what temples, what mosques, what synagogues, what churches to go to and which ones not to. And you just got to hope that Poilievre, when he gets in, picks up the Harper mantra of, our enemies are the bad guys, not our allies.
Thank you, Daniel. It has been my pleasure. We transcended generations talking today between me and you and the rest of the world together.
How old do you think I am, by the way?
You may be 90 or maybe 10.
I'm 32, if you want.
Yes, you are younger than my son.
It's not that bad.
No. You are younger than my son. So it's a delight to speak with you because it's more reasons than one. Because people of all ages and generations must talk. Exactly. Because if we are not talking, we are letting our freedom of speech go away. Comedy is one of that part. So viewers, thank you very much for staying with us. Please like, subscribe, and support our channel. We come to you with conversations that very few dare to have. So thank you very much. Daniel, you are welcome again, my friend.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
As I always say, Satyameva Jayate, truth must triumph. Thank you.